isn't even being watched. And so that's kind of where Tax Revolution Institute got its start. Since then, we brought on different members of the
Hold on there real quick.
Yeah.
So, okay, wait, hold on. So this group within the government that is supposed to be being mindful of abuses by the IRS. First of all, what is this group even called?
Okay, so I was getting there.
Okay.
Basically, so we launched on President's Day. We
Right.
have not been around very long. If we had been around as long as some of the other tax groups, I would quit and walk away because you're not getting anywhere with it.
Right.
But we just launched on President's Day, and we go to this IRS quote-unquote public forum. And I use the quote, you guys... the
He's
audience
using
can't-
air quotes right now.
Yeah, the audience can't see me using air quotes, but I'm using air quotes. The public forum was held in the IRS building, which is, of course, the first place you want to go if you are concerned about the IRS, is right inside their building on the 7th floor.
Right.
You had to be escorted. You had to pre-sign up in advance to be at the forum. You had to sign in twice. You had to give them your ID, and you had to get a pat down. You had to get an escort even to go to the bathroom for this. So
That sounds good.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very good.
No?
No.
there's almost better security at the IRS than there is at the White House.
Wow.
But really, so we go to this forum, and they're talking about the 1998 IRS Restructuring Act. And, of course, there's nobody from the public there. So they whisper, included mostly IRS staff to make it look like there was more people there. But nonetheless, and they mentioned that. And so I go look it up. I'm looking at my smartphone, and they're talking, and it's kind of irrelevant. So I'm looking it up on my smartphone, and I see IRS Oversight Board was created by this 1998 Act as 9 members. This is the board set up by the U.S. Senate to watch the IRS. Okay, well, let's see what they've been doing lately. Well, you go to the IRS Oversight Board's website, and you go to their homepage, and here's exactly what it says. The IRS Oversight Board does not currently have enough members confirmed by the U.S. Senate to make up a quorum, and as a result has suspended operations. Team, it's Congress's fault. This is the parents, Congress or the IRS. And at the end of the day, whose fault is it?
I was going to say, and if it's Congress's fault,
right,
we should be knowing something about this.
we should be looking in the mirror and going, well, it's our fault because
Right.
we elect Congress. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
I can't go in and fire John Koshkinen. And a lot of these groups focus on abolish the IRS, get rid of the IRS. The IRS isn't the problem. Congress has oversight authority over. This is not the IRS's fault. Who's across the political spectrum? We're going to be fixing our tax system, and then we're going to be fixing our broken tax code, and nobody else has done it.
Tell us a little bit about your campaign. Will the IRS silence your political speech in 2016?
Okay, so
How can people get involved with that?
yeah, okay. So people can get involved in that by going to taxrevolution.us. Then there's a free speech, there's a report, 21-page report, all this the fun stuff on there. However, and what we're going to be doing is any amount of time, the event as a regular person and somebody gets hurt, they can form a nonprofit. Why? Liability. If you hold an, you would not, a nonprofit organization, have the name of someone on your website who then becomes a candidate and runs for office, and that's still on your website. So this would impose a search and destroy requirement. If you're part of a nonprofit,
Right.
that if you give an award to somebody, philanthropy award, 2 years ago, and they then run for office in a local election in Alaska, that you have to search and destroy, and you have to have a not be able to as duck. So we're fight this so that when it comes after the election, that they've already felt the heat on this issue. We're Berlin Coalition to protect the free speech of nonprofit organizations and citizens.
Well, this is definitely something you got to get involved with. Go to taxrevolution.us. Thank you, Dan Johnson, Executive Director of the Tax Revolution Institute. It's going to require $8 trillion a year.
That's it?
To enact the SDGs. Now, listen, I can tell you how to get for $5 to pick up an SDG. You know what I'm saying?
Anything you want.
It takes Bang Ki Moon to another level. You know what I'm talking
Anything you want. YouTube, boom, boom, so.
about 3 today. Appreciate you taking some time.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be with you.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about Act for America. For people that maybe aren't familiar with Act for America, I mean, obviously they must be living under a rock, but tell us a little bit about Act for America.
Well, I started Act for America because I wanted to not only educate, but mobilize millions of Americans who are concerned about the national security issue and the threat of radical Islam to our national security and world peace. And I launched Act for America, and today we are the largest national security grassroots organization in the country with 300,000 members, 1,000 chapters nationwide, a full-time director.
About the biggest warning, what would that be?
right now, ISIS is already in the. The radicals are inside the house. They are no longer on the outside. And this is why our government, now more than ever, and our intelligence agencies have to understand the problem. They have to have the liberty to be able to investigate, to monitor, and to do whatever they have to do to make sure they have their eyes on the United States. Bills to protect the country that Act for America is working on right now. One bill is the Muslim Brotherhood bill, classifying the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. The bill just passed in the House. We worked very hard to pass it in the House. Not one Democrat signed on that bill, which is shameful, because the national security issue is an American issue.
It's not a partisan issue.
It's not a partisan issue. And now we have the same bill coming down the pipe in the Senate. So we want people listening to us on this interview right now to contact their senators to push for that bill. And for more information, we make your job so easy. Go to our website, actforamerica.org. Go on our Contact Congress tab or the Legislative tab, and you will be able to see that bill, read what it's all about, contact your member of Congress. You just have to type in your zip code, and we will give you your elected member of the Senate, so you can call them, email them, tell them about the bill, and ask them to sponsor it. We have to identify the enemy in order to protect the country.
That's absolutely
So
correct.
a question I have, Brigitte, this is always puzzled me, is that the left, who is always trying to curtail religious liberty, is in favor of Islamization.
There's always a fundamental disconnect. In fact, Trevor Loudon was on the show yesterday, and he was even talking. I asked him, I said, the McCarthy trials, where the government stood up and tried to root out communism from within the government. He stated that there's a need for that, and there will be a tie between the socialist and the communist belief system and the acceptance of Islam inside of our government, of radical Islamism inside of our government. Do you think we'll ever get to a place to where our government will begin to root out like the Muslim Brotherhood, the front groups, the CARES, and
right now, the front groups of the Muslim Brotherhood walk on the red VIP carpet to get into the White House.
Right.
Wow.
As a guest, as a VIP guest of the president. Right now, the enemy is sitting, you heard me, you and I talked before about the Muslim Brotherhood sending it overseas. That project, which was submitted as evidence, lists 29 front Islamic organizations set up in America for the sole purpose of sabotaging America and destroying it. The number one on the list is ISNA, Islamic Society of North America.
Right.
They are now the last page of the they are both.
Okay.
They are using Islam to rallying supporters worldwide to support their cause, and Islam is the end goal, the establishment of an Islamic caliphate worldwide. Now, when ISIS was established, look at them now. They are no longer only in the Middle East. They are in Australia. They are in Canada. They are in America. They are in Europe.
Right.
They are mushrooming like cancer, and they are recruiting within societies, Western societies. They are even now getting their hands and trying to develop biological weapons and weapons of mass destruction. Can you imagine a world with an organization like ISIS with weapons of mass destruction in its hand?
Wow.
The situation is so grave right now. This is why the American public must understand what's at stake.
Right.
Why we can no longer ignore the national security issue and think, well, it's over there, it's no longer here. They are here. And this is why this next election is an election about survival. The survival of not only America, but the survival of Western civilization. America is the pinnacle, is the superpower of Western civilization. As America goes, as Western civilization goes. And this is why the next...
Which, if they do not like and embrace Western culture, they see another force that they can be in partnership with to destroy Western culture,
to ultimately overthrow it.
They are apologizing for the United States on a regular basis, which is the pinnacle, like you said, of Western culture. So here we have two forces: Islam, call it whatever you want, progressivism, socialism, whatever you want to call it.
50 Shades of Marxism.
The enemy is the same. The enemy is the same, which is Western culture. So, man, that's just powerful stuff.
Man.
Yeah.
No, that's really great stuff.
Yeah, they are. They are. And this is why we are mobilizing the nation. And this is why I encourage people to go to actforamerica.org. I tell people we named the organization Act for America. Not think about America, not wish for America, not hope for America, not pray for America. You can do all the above.
That's right.
But without taking action, nothing happens. Education is important, but education by itself is not sufficient. Education must be coupled for action. The time to educate is over. Now is the time to mobilize. Now is the time to become active, using our democracy to apply pressure on our elected officials to do the right thing by standing up for everything that is American, for our values, for our freedoms, for everything we cherish in order to protect ourselves.
From the far left, they
Can have a Capitol Hill.
Absolutely.
No, I was going to say, you haven't been doing this just recently. You've been doing this for a while now.
Yes.
Do you still kind of feel like a lone voice crying out in the wilderness? Or have you seen, is there anything encouraging about,
Burying their head in the sand, protecting the problem did not exist. They were forced to wake up and stand up. What's going on? Because people now are asking questions worldwide. Even if they want to ignore our voices, they can no longer ignore the news on mainstream media. When you hear about a beheading, a nanny beheading a child, for example, in Australia or whatever it was, or all the murders that they are doing.
Burning someone in a cage.
That's right, exactly.
Right.
They can no longer ignore that. And people are waking up. And look, the Trump phenomenon. I mean, why do you think we have a Trump that resonating throughout our country?
Yeah.
People are fed up and they are hungry for somebody who's not worried about getting votes because he could care less. They're not worried. He's not worried like other elected officials on Capitol Hill who are being lobbied by Karen Isnan. Oh, we have to play nicey and say enough is enough.
It's going to require $1 billion a year.
That's it?
To enact the SDGs. Now, listen, I can tell you how to get for $5 to pick up an SDG. You know what I'm saying?
Anything you want.
Takes Bang Ki-moon to another level. You know what I'm
Anything you want. YouTube boom boom soul brother.
Mind me not to take you to the Bangkok spa.
All right, so the for hour. You must go home now.
There about $3 trillion.
Feel Live with Chris and Trey from We Are America Radio, Red State Talk Radio, Buzz Radio Network, and we're at CPAC 2016 and having a blast and meeting a whole bunch of people. We just had Brigitte Gabriel. Is that surreal?
Listen, she comes in like an IV of just pure amphetamine. You know what I'm saying? Like she's just, her energy, dude, is just so freaking contagious.
Yes, I mean, and it's funny because when you meet her and you talk to her for the first time, she seems like just very happy and very. I don't want to say that she doesn't seem happy when she's on the air, but she just when she turns it on, it's on. You know what I mean?
And is this wrong? Okay, like I'm sitting there listening to her talk, and there's a part of me that's like, I want her just to start yelling at me in Arabic.
You're listening to the battle.
And snatched up. The great one is like running over to take a picture with him.
I know. He's like, hey, check out who I ran into. I'm thinking, all right, he ran into Wayne or he ran into no. He run into Levin and Levin grabbed him out of the crowd to get a picture. I mean, come on.
Well, with Levin, we literally just ran into each other.
That's awesome.
Like, literally ran into each other, and then I was like, oh, hey, you're Mark Levin. And he was like, oh, hey, you're Andrew. I'm just kidding. He didn't know.
Thank me.
But I was like, whoa, man, hey, I'm so sorry. And but I was like, hey, can we take a picture?
That is awesome. So I said that I need to follow Andrew around to make sure that I have some of these unfortunate bumps.
Right, because He took a picture with Mark Levin.
Right.
I've interviewed Trevor Loudon.
Yeah.
You've done neither of those two.
Yeah,
things.
thank you. Appreciate that, Trey. So when our equipment was having
By Glenn Beck. A little bit about the work that you do in Houston.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably, if you tell people where you're from,
Yeah, they're not going to.
they have no clue.
No.
But then you tell them you're from Houston, and people are like, oh, like what part? And you're like, oh, well, okay, 2 hours outside of Houston,
Yeah.
which back home, that's like not New Orleans.
that's
Right.
out of Louisiana.
Right. Yeah, that's out of Louisiana.
Mississippi.
Yeah, no.
You're from Mobile.
Right. So, my ministry is based in. I pastor a church 2 hours outside of Houston, but our ministry is based actually in Houston. That's where our office is. That's where all my family is, and that's where my entourage is based out of. Just to borrow from the celebrity, I guess. But that's where they're all based out of. So anyway, I have a show here on We Are America Radio as well. It's called The Intersection.
Right.
We tackle everything from a faith, current events, and politics perspective. And I'm the executive director of the Truth and Liberty Foundation. So I actually travel the nation talking about God and government and rekindling the heart of our nation. And I teach pastoral staffs, church leaderships, how to arm themselves in the fight for religious liberty. Because, man, I know of 2 churches already that have closed their doors because they just don't want to fight. They'd rather close their doors and not have to go up against a SOGI ordinance or something. For those of you that don't know what SOGI is, it's the sexual orientation, gender identity, gender-neutral bathroom ordinances that these cities are trying to pass. They'd rather just close their doors. But simple things like adapting their bylaws to meet a facility of use from their scriptural beliefs, and putting that in writing as their, because most churches are 501c3s, they can do that, and then they can say, you know what, we have this, this is in our bylaws. This is legal. We don't have to succumb to those things, and other things. I mean, are they ready for somebody to walk through the door and put their pastor in handcuffs for hate speech because they said the word homosexual?
I'm sorry. What was that?
What was that? We got.
You're from outside of.
So it seems like you mentioned something, and I want to talk about this because I have a firm belief.
We even had a good conversation off air with what's Kathy's last name? Kathy and Julio.
Oh, Kathy, is it Barnett?
Barnett, yeah.
Is it? Yeah, Kathy.
Yes.
Yep, Kathy Barnett.
Who also has a show on We Are America Radio.
I mean, it was. I mean, it's been some genuine good conversation amongst Christians.
Yeah.
I mean,
So, and what's interesting is that it's not just all about the Bible. It's
Right.
not all about just the Constitution. It's about how these things are married together. It's a something it's like a basket that's woven that holds the fabric of the country together.
yeah.
Right.
For us, it's inseparable.
Right. So when we're talking about the destruction of Western culture, it seems like the topics that we've talked about, if we dig into things like gay marriage, we dig into like what you just talked about, the bathrooms where they're making it to where men and women or girls and boys can go in the same bathroom.
Right.
Or lack thereof.
Right.
You were made a boy or a girl.
Right.
There aren't any
Regardless
questions.
of the size of your hands.
Right.
Regardless. But there's nothing wrong down there. It's huge.
We went there, folks. We went there.
I mean, it's.
But if you can get somebody to deny their own sex, it's not that much harder to get somebody to deny any principles at
Right.
all.
Well, Andrew was doing an interview
Yeah.
with a documentary about atheism, right? I think you had just got finished interviewing.
Yeah, no, that was a live TBS interview, apparently.
Oh, okay. Well, cool. Okay, great.
Yeah.
There we go, folks. We're stuck in the closet doing radio shows. And
Cool worldview. And I said, no, Star, look, I'm a Christian. And she goes, no, that's fine. She says, I'm happy you're going to heaven. But you need to get a biblical worldview. And this is probably about 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't think I know what that means. Right? And then I said, well, what do you suggest that I read? And she was like, Chuck Colson, How Now Shall We Live? And I discovered worldviewweekend.com, Brandon Howes and his organization. And I was like, this is it. This is the competing worldviews. We're talking about secular humanism. We're talking about atheism. We're talking about Marxism and every shade of it. We're talking about Islam. These worldviews they stand, I understand, because our forgiveness of sins and the gift of eternal life. So it's imperative that we understand the lens by which everyone views something. Mm-hmm. And I heard you say that in the interview about the worldview.
Yeah.
With your work with other pastors and ministers and churches, do you have something specific in there that helps them to shape, even though these are ministers?
Yeah.
they may be ministers operating with a secular. They may have been educated by secular humanist colleges and atheist universities,
right?
So which has helped shape their worldview. Do you do anything to try to help them solidify that?
So
and interpret things?
Basically, one of the things, and this isn't original to me. Obviously, first and foremost, it's original.
Faith compels us to give you every opportunity that was given to us through the grace of God. And for
yes, he's a T over something. You now have that authority,
right?
So, man, I watched a video. I guess it was a couple of weeks, maybe 2 weeks ago now, that a pretty well-known evangelist did on Facebook. He put it on Facebook, and it might be on YouTube and stuff. But basically, the premise of the entire video is: don't worry about taking sides in a political party. Don't worry about any of this stuff because God's in control. And that's a cop-out.
Right.
It is.
Right.
That's just lazy.
But it's an old doctrine, and it's very Calvinistic to a point. And I'm not bashing any denominational teaching. I'm not bashing any one person. But here's the thing: I was taught this, believe it or not, by a guy that is a avowed Calvinist, and he taught this to me, and he said, if God gave you control over something, you have the control now. God's not going to intervene freely in something that he's already given you dominion over.
Right.
And when it comes to America, when it comes to a nation that was founded on the principles of we are all endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, among those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and then you take the Constitution. Well, let's just stick to the Declaration first. You have 20 plus citations in there that are listed against the king. Those citations are all biblical in nature.
Right.
They're all biblical grievances. Then we add to that our founding document, the Constitution. The Constitution is made up of over 200 Bible verses, either directly cited, paraphrased, or alluded to. That's a crazy amount of biblical study. You add to that a third, at minimum, a third of our founding fathers and the signers of the Declaration and the Constitution, a third of them were active members of the church, if not preachers and theologians. So when you look at that aspect, they understood what it meant. Here's the land. Subdue it. You have to do it. Basically, the best way I've ever heard it put was by David Barton. The Constitution is man's solidification of God's ordination to God-given rights.
Wow.
And that's exactly what it is.
That's
so
good.
I teach preachers and pastors, man, God is not your fairy godmother.
Right.
Right.
You can't bippity-boppity boot out your way out of progressive secularism.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. You got to take command. You got to take charge. Charles Finney is a cleric during the American Revolution. He said, if the church loses all interest in Christianity, the pulpit is responsible for it.
Right.
He says, if the church becomes degenerate and worldly, the pulpit's responsible for it. He says, if Satan rules in our halls of legislation, the pulpit is responsible for it. When you think about all that Charles Finney talked about, and it's a really long list of things that he says the pulpit's responsible for, if preachers and pastors, sovereign God, the God that I believe in is a sovereign God, he is all-powerful and he has all kingship. But when he gives you authority...
I think what you're pointing at is that it's a huge responsibility.
It is.
Right? We have a huge responsibility, not only as Americans, but as Christians.
Yeah.
Right? And we can't just be passive in the fact and expect things to get done because God's good and things are going to happen right.
Yeah, so it goes back to what you were asking. We have to have a biblical worldview.
Right.
Right.
Not just a biblical view. Yeah, I have a biblical view in my home.
Right.
I do. I teach my kids biblical values.
Right.
But that better stem beyond my home.
Right.
If I want my kids to have a future, and they're not going to. They asked me in that interview, they tried to trip me up, and they said, well, how far does your faith go when it comes to your political beliefs? And I said, listen, my faith doesn't leave me ever.
Right.
Ever. Jesus isn't some T-shirt I put on and take off at night.
Right.
You know,
Out here. And it's more than just about is that in order to be driven by principles, it's not just reading the Constitution. It's also reading the Bible and understanding those principles to go forward and do the right thing and be guided in that way.
Yeah.
But if people are going to be, think about like 4 concentric circles, right? And everybody wants to go and change the culture. Everybody wants to. I think for Christians, and not all, but for many, they look at the culture around them. They look at everything that they don't agree with. They don't want to be a part of. But it almost, like Paul said, you can't be. You shouldn't be of the world, but you got to be in it. Otherwise, you're like a hermit, right?
Yeah.
So they see the biggest circle, which on the outside is, of course, culture.
You know, getting down on your knees and saying a prayer, it's actually knowing him,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's what we're talking about.
Greatest country.
Now, here's where I'm going to correct you just a little bit.
No, absolutely. Come on.
But this is
the
so
battlefield.
I want you to hear what you said.
Okay.
Because this is something that a lot of people say. You say we want to change the culture, right? Okay, let's stop there. Let's end Mark.
Not we, but go ahead.
But Christians,
Many people, yeah.
many Christians want to change the culture, right? And that's what a lot of people say.
Right.
Let's mark it right there. Let's put that to the side.
With the most amount of responsibility. Now, pick up your responsibility, pick up your cross, and do what you got to do.
And use that to govern by what I was going to say next. The Constitution is a biblically based document.
Right.
You know, and so even an atheist, if he follows the Constitution, guess what? He's following the Scriptures.
And that's what I was going to ask you. How do you think, if you had the opportunity, maybe you did, maybe you asked Mr. Silverman the question,
Yeah.
how would an atheist
Found our nation, and we can't continue on and have this nation if that's the direct go. So let us appeal unto God, and that's where congressional prayer comes in. That's why the Senate and the House both have a chaplain to this day, and they open up every session in prayer to this day. And
Right.
man, go Google. Those of you that are listening, go Google Chaplain Black's prayers before the Senate. Boy, I tell you what, you want to get a fire lit up under you. I don't know how you can sit in that